Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at large language models, LLMs.
Okay.
Things like Chat GPT, but much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got some fascinating research that we're going to be looking at that suggests that when
Ah,
these LLMs really have to think things through, they get super confident in their answers,
really?
even when they're totally wrong.
Huh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So our source material for this deep dive is a research paper titled Multiple Choice Questions. Reasoning makes large language models, LLMs, more self-confident even when they are wrong.
Okay.
And to help us break down this brain twister, we have an expert in all things LLMs.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a fascinating topic for sure.
Yeah, so this research is looking at how we evaluate LLMs using
Hmm.
multiple choice questions or MCQs.
Right.
Those things that we all probably took in standardized tests.
Yep.
Some good memories, some not so good memories.
Yeah, exactly. Those standardized tests.
But they're kind of a staple in evaluating LLMs.
Yeah, they are. They're efficient, they're scalable,
Right.
and they can test an LLM's knowledge across a vast range of topics.
So how did the researchers in this study, what made it different?
Well, they introduced something called chain of thought prompting,
Okay.
and it's basically like asking the LLM to show its work.
Okay.
So instead of just picking an answer from a multiple choice question, they ask it to lay out its reasoning step by step,
Hmm.
almost like mimicking how we as humans might problem solve.
So the LLMs are being forced to think harder,
Yeah,
but instead of getting it right, they just get more confident.
that's exactly what they found. And it is a bit counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
They tested 7 different LLMs, some you might recognize like GPT-4 and Llama,
Hmm.
and they used a benchmark called MLU,
Okay.
which covers a huge range of topics, like 57 different categories,
Wow.
over 15,000 questions. And what they found is that this confidence boost was pretty consistent across the board, even in categories that didn't require complex reasoning.
So it's like they've doubled down on a bad idea, and
Yeah.
they're convinced they're a genius.
Yeah, it's like they're really sure of themselves, even when they're way off.
Yeah. So how do we explain this?
Well, to understand that, we need to look at how these LLMs operate.
Okay.
They work by predicting the next word in a sequence based on the words that come before it.
Uh-huh.
This is what we call being autoregressive.
So it's kind of like the autocomplete feature on our phones, but on a much grander scale.
Exactly. You got it.
Okay.
Now, with chain of thought prompting why, the LLM is generating this whole chain of reasoning before landing on an answer.
Right.
And this creates a context, a narrative, where the chosen answer seems highly probable to the LLM.
So even if the logic is flawed, the LLM is
Yeah.
basically telling itself a convincing story, and
Yeah.
that's bolstering its confidence.
Exactly. They're getting lost in their own thought process, even if that process is leading them down the wrong path.
It's almost human in a way.
It is a curious parallel, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it actually connects to something called the explanation is believing phenomenon in human psychology.
Oh, really?
Studies have shown that we tend to be more confident about something once we've explained it, even if our explanation is way off base.
Wow. So we're not so different from these LLMs after all.
Yeah, in some ways, we're more alike than we might think.
But this raises some big questions, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
I mean, what does this overly confident yet often inaccurate behavior mean for real-world applications,
Right?
especially in situations where getting it right is critical?
You're hitting on a crucial point. Imagine relying on an LLM for medical diagnosis or a legal decision.
Right.
If it's spouting off wrong answers with a supreme confidence, that could lead to some very serious consequences.
That's a sobering thought.
Yeah, it is.
So where do we go from here? How do we address this potential pitfall?
Well, this study really highlights the need for more research in this area. Can we develop methods to distinguish between genuine understanding and what might be confident bluffing in these LLMs? You know,
It's a good question.
it's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a really tough one, but it's an important one to tackle.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a fascinating challenge, isn't it? Like teaching them to be more self-aware, to question their own assumptions.
Right. And this whole chain of thought thing, it's like we're forcing them to think like us humans.
Mm-hmm.
But what if that's not the most efficient way for them to process information?
That's a really insightful observation.
Yeah.
You know, we might actually be hindering their ability to tap into their unique strengths.
Okay.
Remember, these LLMs are trained on mountains of data.
Right.
That data is their intuition, their gut feeling, if you will.
So by making them overthink things, we're essentially saying, hey, LLM, ignore that vast library of knowledge you have
Yeah.
and solve this problem like a human with a limited set of tools.
Exactly. It's almost comical when you think about it that way.
Yeah, so what's the solution here? Should we just let them loose?
Yeah.
Trust their intuition and hope for the best?
Not quite. It's all about striking a balance.
Okay.
We need to find ways for them to leverage their strengths,
Mhm.
that massive database they've been trained on,
Right.
while also ensuring accuracy and reliability.
So we need to learn to work with them, not against them.
Hmm.
Recognize that they have their own way of thinking,
Right.
which might not always align with our human approach.
Precisely. It's about understanding their limitations while embracing their potential. And who knows, maybe in studying how these LLMs learn and reason there, we might gain a deeper understanding of our own cognitive processes.
It's like a two-way street. We're learning from them as they learn from us.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say we figure out how to make these LLMs more reliable.
Okay.
They're not just confidently spitting out wrong answers.
Mm-hmm.
What are some real-world applications where this technology could be truly transformative?
Oh, the possibilities are vast.
Mm.
Imagine a world where LLMs could help doctors diagnose diseases more accurately or assist lawyers in sifting through mountains of legal documents.
Or personalized education, creating custom learning plans for each student based on their individual needs.
Exactly. They could even help us tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges, like climate change or poverty,
Wow.
by analyzing data and identifying potential solutions.
It's mind-blowing to think about the potential impact.
It is.
Assuming we can overcome these hurdles, of course.
And that's the key point.
Yeah.
It's crucial to approach this technology with a healthy dose of caution and responsibility.
Right.
We need to ensure that it's used ethically and for the betterment of humanity.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've explored the strange world of LLMs where making them think harder can sometimes make them more confident,
Right.
but not necessarily more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
We've also delved into the implications of this finding, especially in those high-stakes situations where getting it right is critical.
Absolutely. Those are the ones that we really have to worry about.
And we've even touched upon the fascinating parallels between human and artificial intelligence, recognizing that both have their strengths and weaknesses.
It's an ongoing journey of discovery, and we're all along for the ride.
And what a ride it is. But before we get carried away with all the possibilities, let's bring it back to that initial head-scratcher.
Okay.
Why do these LLMs get so darn confident even when they're wrong?
Right.
It seems like their reasoning process can lead them down a rabbit hole.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something inherently flawed in how they learn and process information? Or is this just a growing pain, something they'll eventually overcome as the technology continues to evolve?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really makes you wonder if we're just scratching the surface when it comes to understanding how these LLMs work.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole field so exciting. It's like we've opened this Pandora's box of artificial intelligence,
Right.
and we're still trying to figure out what all the buttons and levers do.
And while we're doing that, the LLMs themselves are evolving, learning, adapting.
It's a moving target.
It is a moving target. But let's go back to your point about the LLMs getting overly confident, even when they're wrong.
Okay.
Remember we talked about them being autoregressive?
Yeah.
Predicting the next word based on the ones that came before?
Right, like a supercharged autocomplete.
Well, think about it this way. When they're generating these chains of thought, they're essentially creating a narrative, a story.
Okay.
And just like with any good story, the more details they add, the more convincing it becomes to them,
Right.
even if those details are leading them astray.
So if they're getting caught up in their own storytelling, it's like they've become so focused on creating a compelling narrative that they lose sight of the bigger picture, the actual accuracy of their answer.
That's a great way to put it. And this tendency to prioritize narrative over accuracy, it's not unique to LLMs.
Oh, absolutely. We humans do it too all the time.
Think about those times when you've been absolutely convinced about something, only to find out later that you were completely wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You probably had a whole story, a chain of reasoning that led you to that belief.
And even when presented with evidence to the contrary, it can be really hard to let go of that story.
It's almost as if our brains are wired to seek out patterns and create narratives, even when those narratives aren't necessarily true.
So are we saying that this flaw, this tendency to prioritize narrative over accuracy is somehow baked into the very nature of intelligence itself?
That's a deep question, and one that researchers are still grappling with. But this study certainly provides some food for thought.
Yeah.
It suggests that there might be some fundamental similarities between how humans and LLMs learn and process information.
Similarities that we might not always be comfortable acknowledging. I mean, it's one thing to recognize that our brains can play tricks on us, lead us astray with faulty reasoning,
Right.
but it's another thing to see that reflected in these AI systems that we've created. It's almost like holding up a mirror to our own cognitive biases.
It's definitely humbling, but it's also an opportunity to learn more about ourselves and how we think. By studying these LLMs, we might be able to gain insights into our own cognitive processes and maybe even find ways to mitigate those biases that can lead us astray.
It's like a two-way street. We're learning from them as they learn from us. Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with this fascinating research on LLMs and their tendency to become overly confident, even when wrong.
Yeah, we've explored the possible reasons behind this phenomenon, linking it to the way LLMs process information and their reliance on creating narratives.
We even delved into the implications of this finding for real-world applications, highlighting the need for caution and responsibility as this technology continues to evolve.
Absolutely.
And along the way, we stumbled upon some profound questions about the nature of intelligence itself and the similarities and differences between how humans and LLMs think.
It's been a thought-provoking journey.
It has, and I hope our listeners have found it as engaging and insightful as we have. Remember, the world of artificial intelligence is constantly changing, and we're all learning as we go.
So stay curious, keep questioning, and don't be afraid to challenge those assumptions, even your own.
That's all the time we have for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring.